All right, so welcome. If you're joining us now, my name is Eve Rickert. I'm the publisher at Thornapple Press. I'm calling in from Lekwungen and Osanet territories on the west coast of Vancouver Island, colonially known as Victoria, Canada. And I'm here with Marla Schreiber, who is the author of this new book, out this week, isn't it? On Friday?
It's it's technically
Non-monogamy.
August 1st, but people
Okay,
have copies already.
that's the mysteries of the book industry. So yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, non-monogamy and defying a paradigm. It's the latest book in the More Than Two Essentials series, and I'm really excited to let Marla introduce themselves.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I am Marla. I use they, them pronouns. I am coming to you from the territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and the Chippewa Nations. I am not far from what is known as Takaranto or Toronto, Canada. And yeah, I am a therapist, an educator, and officially now author who is focused on healthy relationships and specializes specifically in non-monogamy. And I've been doing this in my own life for over 20 years. So that's my positionality in all of this.
And we are streaming live right now over Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram on the Thornapple Press pages. So if you want to leave a comment or if you have a question, just comment wherever you're watching and we'll see it on the software that we're using here.
Cool.
So tell us about your book. How
Well,
did it come to be and what can people expect to find?
it's so funny. I was on a podcast recording this morning where I was asked a similar question, but it's very funny that this is the first time that I'm having this conversation with you, Eve, because what I always say is, how did this book come to be? I went to a conference where I was doing a workshop about mononormativity in non-monogamy and the impact of sort of the paradigm of mononormativity, which is like sort of position monogamy as the right or correct or most ethical, most expected way to be in partnership. And I went to someone else's workshop where there was this lovely person named Eve in the workshop with me who I did not know. And wanted to chat with Eve about some stuff that she was saying in the workshop. And I managed to get a hold of her, ask questions about something completely unrelated. And very short into our conversation, she offered me the opportunity to write a book about the thing I had done my workshop on. So that's how this book came to be.
Yeah, I actually have acquired several books that way. I was just thinking about that. Joel and Nadi's Monster Under the Bed and Polysecure were both grew out of conference workshops.
What a
So
wild world. That's so fat. Like, but it's just funny, right? Because in theory, we didn't even really spend time together at the conference. It was because I
yeah.
chased you down to ask you a question about something completely unrelated. So it's like
Well, I think I was intending to
little
follow
world.
up with you too. So you just got me first.
Oh, thank you. That's nice.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, so that's like a little secret that I know now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the other thing I would say about mononormativity in general, or like paradigms that impact non-monogamy, is that the reason I gave that workshop to begin with is because I think I've come to see I work as a therapist, but also, running groups and support groups for non-monogamous folks over the years, and just doing this, is that I've really come to see that, of course, there are different challenges that we all face, and we all have our own, specific contexts and nuance in our own lives. But when I take a step back and I'm like, what are some of, like, if I had to think about, like, what is the biggest challenge that non-monogamous folks experience as they start trying to practice this thing? And by start, I mean throughout the lifetime of practicing non-monogamy, is so much of it is connected to be in a world that plays back for us monogamy as the right way to do relationships. And all of the things that come with that kind of thinking and with that kind of planning and with that kind of social kind of endeavor, etc. So that was a big part for me about what sort of what led me to even be thinking about sort of paradigms in general, just because of how impactful they are to so many members of our community.
So can you, for those joining who aren't familiar, can you define mononormativity?
Absolutely. It took me probably like 4 days to get that solid just in writing, like for a very short piece of the book is like, how, let's define the terms. And I was like, anyway. Defining mononormativity, I think, so it really is, the first thing we'll define quickly is what is a paradigm. So I always say that a paradigm is like, it is the status quo. It's, you know, I say it's kind of like the tea that we're steeped in. It's everything we know in our reality, right? So we see paradigms mirrored back for us. I use in the book, I think I use the example of capitalism, right? As a social paradigm that like, I don't have to think about if I go into a store to buy cheese. I don't know why cheese is the thing, but if I go to buy cheese, I have to buy it, right? I'm going to give someone, you know, money that has been created by our systems in order to, you know, compensate as part of the paradigm of capitalism. I don't have to think about it, right? I might have to think that if I pocket the cheese and I leave, that I'm stealing under that paradigm, right? All of those things, but it's not something we have to think of. I mean, we do think about it. Let's say I imagine a lot, but it's not something we have to think about. It's just there, right? It's different expressions that we use, right? Bang for your buck, right? We have all these different expressions that play back this paradigm, in this case, capitalism, to us as reality. So hopping over to mononormativity is a paradigm that is played back at us in songs, on TV, etc., in the way we think about relationships, in the laws of the places that many of us live, right? And what it tells us is that we are just expected to be monogamous. Monogamy is the norm, right? Mononormativity. So, you know, if I see, you know, I live with one of my partners, and to anybody who sees us, they probably just assume that they're just, you know, an average monogamous couple living together, when in reality, right, that assumption is like, oh, you know, two people buy a house together, they must be a monogamous couple. They don't have to think about it. But if you look under the surface of reality, that's not the case.
So can you talk about some of the ways that that plays out when people become non-monogamous, or people engage in non-monogamous relationships, whether they've ever done anything else or not?
Sure,
I don't want to
yeah.
assume that people are always opening up from being monogamous, because of course that's not the case.
Of course, of course. No, these are great questions. Thank you, Eve. I think that, sorry, I'm trying to frame the question. So can you ask me again, just the way you framed it, so I don't
So
lose myself?
you've talked about it sort of in the general sense,
Mhm.
but in term, you know, one of the things that you talk about in your book is how this plays out at an interpersonal level when you're actually
Yes.
engaging in relationships that are outside the norm. So can you offer some examples of common ways that this plays out for people?
Yes, thank you so much. So, I mean, in the ways that it plays out, sometimes it's like simple things, right? Like examples that we get all the time, like you listen to even the language of "bay," right? Like "bay," right? You're calling "bay" means before, it stands for before anyone else, right? So it's, we're
Mm,
assuming it's one
I did not
person,
know that.
right, before anyone else. So when I call her, I don't say "bay" in my life, although we do joke about
I
it like
just
a
thought it
goat
was short for
sometimes.
baby. I did not realize that.
Before
Interesting.
anyone else. Right? In
Okay.
our house, we go "Bah," like goats. Anyway, I'll just say that. So the thing is that, you know, there's these ideas that are just like wrapped into our society, right? Songs that like are all about like the one and only. What, for those of us who are old enough to unfortunately watch Friends, it was great, did not age well. We all know this, but like we won't get into that. But like, you know, your lobster, you're looking for your penguin, right? People ask me questions online about like, oh, what do you think about twin flames? And I'm like, I don't know enough to answer that, to be honest. But you know, there are these ideas, soulmate, right? Which is fascinating because I actually believe in soulmates. I just don't think there's only one. But these ideas that kind of, you know, are you bringing a plus into the event? That's mononormativity in action, right? We just assume that if you're bringing someone, it's one person. And I will say, as somebody who has hosted events, sometimes financially, it's hard for me to be like, oh yeah, bring as many people as you want, right? That's not always an easy option, but it is definitely, you know, a way of thinking around mononormativity. Or, you know, another great example, like, you know, filling out forms, like who's your next of kin, your one emergency contact, right? So, and I think that's changing a little bit, right? So that we can include multiple family members. But, you know, historically, that's kind of what we were looking at. And so, or like a love triangle on television, when somebody has to make a choice between multiple love interests, even though maybe they could all, you know, figure out a way that isn't monogamous to sort it out. I feel like
It
I lost
just,
Eve. Oh,
yeah, no, sorry, I'm here. I just got a note from Hazel, our associate publisher, saying that Instagram is not streaming.
okay.
And okay,
That's not great.
so I'm gonna try to fix that,
Yeah,
and
let's
then we'll,
definitely do the fixie fix.
yeah,
I'm here for it.
let's
Yeah,
see
because
if
I just
that
opened
works.
Instagram. I'm not seeing it. Yeah.
Okay. That's so
For anyone,
weird. I might not be able to figure this out. Um,
I wish I
Sorry
could
for the
offer support,
interruption
but I am,
if you're watching us right now, but I'm
yeah,
going to try this one more time and then I'm going to give up.
of course. Apologies, folks. I am, if anyone is here, I am the least qualified person to help.
Okay. I'll try this one more time, and if it does not work, copy the stream key and enter it into your streaming software. Let's do that right now. We're going to add Instagram back.
I believe.
Save changes. Hit go live. See, that changed the stream key. Every time I hit go live, it changes the stream key. I think I'm going to give up on Instagram right now so that we can keep talking.
Oh,
Because the
yeah,
folks who are joining us on Facebook and YouTube probably don't want to see us troubleshooting
like
Instagram.
wait
We'll
and
figure out what to
troubleshoot.
do later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we can probably find a way to like grab the video and maybe share it there if we can.
Yeah. Sorry for the interruptions, folks. So I have some questions about, well, some sort of questions and discussion topics that came up
Of
for me
course.
reading your book.
Awesome.
And one of them we might need a lot longer than the time we have to discuss, and it might actually be like a whole other live stream, maybe.
Okay.
But can we talk about hierarchy?
Oh
Because
man.
we don't have to.
Yeah. No.
But it's
I
something
made a
that,
face. My deal is that every happy to talk about hierarchy, or happy. I am more than willing to talk about hierarchy. It's also very funny because every time I've gone to do an interview with someone in the last, like, let's say month or so, they bring that up. Like, people are very interested in talking about hierarchy. And let's be real, can we talk about mononormativity without it? Not really.
yeah.
Like, courtesy of your fabulous word count you gave me, I couldn't talk about more than this much, which is good because I can talk forever. So I actually, interestingly, when I was reading back through the book, I was like, oh, I definitely mention hierarchy and there's like a whole like footnote about it, but I don't go deep into it. But I talk about other things connected to it, like couples privilege. I talk about things that kind of like how to deal with these different things. But it's super funny because I made a post on like Instagram. I don't know if it even got to TikTok, but it was on like a carousel on Instagram where I was like, that's it. I'm done talking about hierarchy. I'm over it. And so it's super funny.
I actually
people
saw
are
that
like,
post
oh.
and I thought about it when I made that note in my notebook.
I love it. And so I think this is happening because I have it pinned on my Instagram. And so people are like, can we talk about hierarchy? And I'm like, yep, let's do it. But
Well,
in order to not talk about the things, sometimes we have to point to the thing we don't want to talk about, right? Because I don't want it to become taboo. So let's do it. What you got?
well, I just think it's funny because so in my book, More Than 2 Second Edition, which came out last year, I have this section. I don't know if this will show or if it'll be reversed, but this is a 12-page section, literally called "Why It's Hard to Talk About Hierarchy."
Amazing.
That and I don't know if I know that you read this book, but I don't know if you remember that section specifically, but it really like I didn't have a Andrea and I didn't have a resolution for this ultimately, because it was like, yeah, there's all these reasons it's really hard to talk about, and yet we still need to talk about at least the power dynamics and the potential for harm and all of this stuff that's underneath it. But actually, you mentioned something else that we might want to define for our audience, which is couples privilege. And I know that's discussed at length in your book as well.
Yes.
So could you just give a quick definition of that?
Of course, I'd be happy to. So couples privilege is really what we're talking about is, and it is a type of hierarchy. It's a social hierarchy, right? And again, I think if we're going to be talking about hierarchy, we'll define it in a second. I can talk about all the reasons I don't want to talk about it. But when we talk about couples privilege, it is a huge piece of mononormativity or the monogamous paradigm. And if we look at it, the way it plays out is that monogamy prizes coupleship, right? So it's a monogamous union or a couple between two people, right? So the way couples privilege plays out in society is, for example, again, before anyone else, right? It's prioritizing in a very significant way the other member of a couple, but we see that baked into legal stuff, right? So if you're legally married to someone, there are certain privileges that you get, right? Couples privilege is if I live with my partner and I knew someone who had broken, I think it was an ankle or something in the leg and couldn't walk. So like there's someone else to take out the garbage. Right? Couples privilege is I need to go run some errands and there's someone there to take care of the kids. Right? Couples privilege is, I think the idea of a privilege is that a lot of the time we're not aware that it's there, right? We're not necessarily conscious of the fact that we have this thing that puts us or a group of people kind of ahead in a certain way in society. And it often offers us certain kinds of power and or prestige as well. So within the monogamous paradigm, the couple is at the core of having that privilege.
Yeah, it's interesting as someone who has been solo poly now for about 7 years, and I intend to stay that way. I don't I don't foresee a nesting relationship in my future, but there's also so many things that solo poly or single-ish folks are sort of expected to deal with alone, that people who are in couples, just like, it wouldn't occur to them that that would be a thing that they could deal with on their own. I'm not coming, well, I mean, an injury or an illness is actually a good example. The idea that like you would, if I'm sick, I have to just deal with it. If I'm injured, I have to just deal with it. And maybe I can organize some kind of like care train with some friends, but I still have to organize that. And the idea that like, there's just someone there to do that for you if you are in a couple is really that's not necessarily the best example, because I do feel like there are ways that that's played out in my relationships that are sort of like there's an element of sneakyarchy to it as well. But sneakyarchy, for those who don't know, is when there are hierarchical elements to a relationship, but they aren't explicitly stated. So they're invisible and you just sort of run up against them, but then they're treated as well, what else would you expect? Kind of thing.
Yeah. Or like another way I think of sneakyarchy is like when we say there's no hierarchy and then you peek under the surface and there certainly is. It's like, surprise. like, what was I gonna, you were saying, and I was like, oh, it's being solo poly. Yeah. And it's interesting because one of my partners for 8+ years also is solo poly. Like, I really see, I've seen the challenges that can arise when people are expecting that kind of, that escalator relationship that looks very mononormative, right? Like, I remember when she was dating someone, and it was very, this expectation, because we don't live in the same city. And so, she would share with me some of these expectations from this person that she was dating, because even though it was known that she was solo poly, there was, and this person knew that I existed, of course, right? But there was this, you can almost kind of get the pretense of monogamy. And it was interesting, like, her having to explain that, like, I'm not, just because we have lots of time and space together doesn't mean that I want all typical monogamous things with you, or that they're going to be available to you, right? And so I really see the way that folks struggle sometimes with those expectations around, being not just looking to be part of a couple.
Yeah. So why do you think it is so hard to talk about hierarchy?
Because, like, are you ready? Like, rev your engine, because I'm
I
revving
wrote
mine.
12 pages about it. I've had my say, but I want to hear what you have to say.
That is fair. I mean, I've spoken more than 12 pages worth of time about it, but I've not written 12 pages about it.
Yeah.
My thing about hierarchy is that in theory, talking about hierarchy is not a problem, which is why I've given it so much attention historically. Okay. So, like, I have talked about it a lot until I hit and I was like, that's it, I'm out, I'm done. So the problem that I was seeing, and this is part of being in relationships, supporting people who are in relationships, and also being somebody who makes content online, right? So, like, being part of online communities where there are many people talking about this, whether, regular folks just like showing up in comment sections, or people who are actually creating content about it. What I realized was happening is, one, I'm going to make this sound like I've really thought it through in terms of my answer, but I'm making this up as I go. So I hope this is coherent. One is that we're not all clear on definitions. We say the word hierarchy, and it has become very apparent to me that we're not all building conversations based on the same meaning. So that's one. Number two, the word hierarchy has been, I think, demonized, and there's been a lot of shaming and blaming and judgment around the language and the word hierarchy, or hierarchical relationships. And so just the moment you say it, so many people become activated, if not actually triggered. And I'm saying triggered as someone talking from a psychological background, when we were talking about actually having a real trauma response. So, like, some people literally will hear hierarchy or think they're being accused of hierarchy, and because apparently it's like the worst thing in the world, and like, watch out, it's totally it's the devil's work. But sorry, that was a joke. That was maybe for some people not funny. I apologize. But also, the thing is that, like, people literally will go into a fight, flight, freeze, appease response when we're acting from those places, when our nervous system are literally experiencing a sense of danger. We're not using our, like, what we call, like, the wise owl part of our brain that is able to think critically and have conversations and judge things accordingly, right? So those things together. And I think the last thing is just that the word hierarchy, whether you're saying anti-hierarchy or hierarchy, whatever you're saying, it has just unfortunately gotten to a point where it has, instead of building bridges and creating growth and investigation and curiosity, etc., within our communities, I've just watched people just ripping each other to shreds. And that is not the world I want to be a part of. And I think that I gave a workshop with, I don't know if folks know Laura Boyle from Ready for Polyamory, but we gave a workshop, I think last May, about the language. We called it jargon and no-go. And it was about the jargon of non-monogamy and the way that, like, the words can help us, but they can also hinder us, right? And one of the words was like hierarchy. And the thing is that decided together, we were, I mean, I made the like, no more, I'm done post. But what we discussed together is like, instead of saying hierarchy, like, sure, you can start there. But the problem is, what else could we be talking about? So for me, rather than talking about hierarchy, I would rather be talking about, okay, do we have couples privilege in our relationships? If it exists, how do we work to sort of enhance or dismantle it? Do we have other kinds of privilege in our relationships that are helpful, pardon me, or hindering? How do we create equity? What does priority mean and look like in our relationships? What are expectations and agreements that we can all make sure we are agreeing to, consenting to, etc.? And I think breaking down the things we need to discuss in order to dismantle or create hierarchy, right? But ideally to build equity, and that's not equality. I'm not saying I'm against equality, but some people come and they're like, egalitarian relationships. I go on a date with you and I go on a date with you. And then we switch and I go on a date with you. We do this tit for tat. You know what? We're just going to all live together and we're going to have equal. And I'm like, oh, that also can become toxic too. So my thing is like, let's talk about what we're talking about and think about how to meet everyone's needs openly, honestly, and respectfully. And scene.
Okay. So it's interesting to me. You talked about, we don't really have a shared language around that. That's something that I discuss a little bit in More Than 2 Second Edition, how there's these really kind of two competing definitions of hierarchy. But I think that there is an element of, I want to call it bad faith, but not bad faith in the sense that there is malice, but bad faith in the sense that people are not engaging fully honestly because there are things that they're either trying to get an upper hand in the conversation, or there are maybe some things that they don't want to look at. And so I think that to some degree there can be, I'll try to give a picture of this. Like, so there's the one definition, which is like, we have different priorities. The person who I have been with longer or have, kids with or more shared responsibilities is going to have a greater influence in my decision than the person who isn't entwined with me in that way, right? So there's this prioritization and relative power that comes along with that, of course. And then there's a hierarchy of sort of control and decision making over other relationships. And so I think when you get those like traumatized responses, in my experience, often they're coming from people who have been in situations like that and experienced this like extreme disempowerment from having someone external to your relationship making decisions and calling shots for you in spaces where you're like deeply vulnerable. But I think what can happen is that people who are engaging in the second kind of hierarchy will claim that they're engaging in the first and use that as cover for the second. But then people who want more in their relationships than they can get, but maybe aren't in that power hierarchy specifically, may claim that there's hierarchy because it feels bad to be in that. It feels bad. It can feel bad to be in the first kind of situation when you can't get everything you want, right? But it's not necessarily that same like deeply like to me like the experience was quite violating experience of like that external control. And so you get these people at odds who are like, it's kind of about definitions, but it's also kind of about like, often I think trying to twist the conversation so that you can make the other person the bad guy and get what you want ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of presenting it. I appreciate the nuance of what you're sharing. And I think that, when I started being like, okay, hold on, what are we talking? Oh, hello, hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Sorry, my video just went like surprise. I'm not sure. Everything seems okay. As long as we're still on. I was like,
I think we're still on.
I had some internet challenges over the last week that seem to have been fixed, but I'm not like that. You want to talk about a trauma response? I literally was like, oh my God.
You have glitched on me a couple of times, but I don't know. I think that's on my end. Like, I don't think that's happening in the stream. But also, StreamYard
Interesting.
says that we're streaming to Instagram and we're not. So who the heck knows? We'll find out after the conversation.
So fun. I love a good mystery. But yeah, I think I really appreciate kind of the addition of that way of looking at how hierarchy kind of plays out. And I think for me, what I did, someone says they're seeing the glitching too. Because
Okay.
I've seen you like glitch in and out of times, but your
Mhm.
voice has never. Friend, can you hear us? Like, when we glitch, do you lose the audio as well, or is it just the video? This happens to me in Zoom calls all the time where I'm like, if we have to turn off the camera, I don't care, but I need to hear you and I need you to hear me.
Mhm.
Yes, audio?
Yes, you can hear the audio, or yes, the audio is glitching.
Also, thank you. Thank you for being our like tester, our user, like
Right.
tester. Video audio gets a bit garbled, but comes through. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. On today's episode of Doing the Best We Can with Thornapple
Right.
Press. So what I will say, thank you so much, friend. What I will, I did when hierarchy, when I was just seeing all these different people talking about things, and I was like, I was getting confused, right? Because some people were talking about priority, and some people were talking about, I was hearing egalitarianism and all this stuff. The thing, the thing that I decided I was going to do is I just Googled it. I was like, let's just get a definition. And what was so impactful for me is like there were three main components of hierarchy from the definitional perspective, and it was status, authority, and rank. And from there, I was like, oh, okay, so we're not talking about priority. We can
Mhm.
have priority outside of status, authority, and rank, right? And then, but then started getting really confusing to me too, is I was like, okay, hold on. So for example, I'm legally married to one of my partners, okay? By definition, that gives us status, legal status, right? That's the couple's privilege thing we were talking about, right? So I have a piece of what shows up in hierarchy. But then the question is, okay, but we don't rank each other and our other partners. Like, we definitely have done a lot of work to lean, I would say, toward relationship anarchy over the years. Although some would say that we, some are like, you can't do relationship anarchy if you're married. Others say you can. Again, right? Conversations for maybe another day. But I think the thing is for me that I'm like, okay, we don't have clarity on like what happens if you have some of what's in the definition of hierarchy, but not the whole thing. And then it's like, if I'm struggling with that, someone who's been trying to unpack this, trying to make sense of this, trying to educate others around this, what is happening to someone who's maybe brand new to this or who's just starting this journey of like exploring hierarchy or not, right? And how does this actually cause more harm? The language. But what you were saying, Eve, and this, I'll stop talking in a sec, but what you were saying that I thought was really invaluable is, to me, there's, let's talk normativity, right? Like stuff that shows up in here when it comes to this is that we are so used to the idea that we're supposed to want all of someone's attention, that we're supposed to be someone's everything, right? All these tropes of monogamy that have come our ways, we have been built to feel insecure when there's competition, right? Like, and that's another one of the paradigms, right? You look at like gender-based competition, right? And then you see things like a one penis policy or like what, all this stuff, which is the idea that like, in a hetero couple, it's like, oh, usually the femme, it's like, oh, it's fine if you date other femmes, but I'm the only man. I've like, I'm take all with a grain of salt, please, gender. But I think the thing is that the ways that we have been conditioned to feel scarcity, the ways that we've been conditioned to feel that like, oh, if my partner's looking at someone else, that means they're going to leave me. And so it brings us to these very young like experiences of
Mhm.
trying to feel connected, right? This, I mean, you mentioned polysecure, right? Our attachment stuff comes up, like coming in the compassionate role of being a therapist. I understand why people will often, their first response is to try to control a situation, even if that is not the healthy or the respectful or the effective way of doing it. But there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking today, as I was prepping for this interview, I think that one of the things that people are doing when they try to implement these type 2 hierarchies, these just prescriptive hierarchies, is define which relationships are real. And one of the ways in which capital T trauma can enter the picture for people in those situations is this erasure of an intimate relationship. Like, I'm
Yeah.
engaging in real deep intimacy with someone, there's attachment developing, but then I'm continually getting these messages that this relationship isn't really real, that it's at some level disposable. And then even like when it's over, that it wasn't really real. And I think, maybe, it's interesting that this was just like the normal way of doing non-monogamy 20 years ago. But now I think we have a parallel with situationships, and we can recognize like that
Yeah.
situationships are pretty harmful. And it's kind of a
Yeah.
similar thing. It's like there's this kind of gaslighting that's going on, where it's like, I want all of the benefits of a partnership with you, but I don't want you ever to have any of the expectations of me,
Yeah.
or I don't want to bear the responsibility that comes with engaging in that intimacy.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
I think that's another aspect of it that's kind of not discussed, is like when you're trying to control other relationships, or you're trying to designate like this is a real relationship and this is not. And that goes back to the mononormativity too, because it's so deeply ingrained that we can only have
Yeah.
one real relationship.
Yeah. Oof. And then also it's like, am I someone who has what I'm thinking is a hierarchical primary partner and I'm trying to keep the other ones casual? And or what happens when I feel really strongly about multiple relationships, but someone is feeling threatened and then they are trying to control that. Like
Right.
it can't be as real as this. Like I, with so much love and care in my heart, I've heard so many people say, I just want to be the most special. I want to
Hmm.
feel special. I want to feel the most special. And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
man, when someone says that, I literally can see the small child inside of them.
Hmm.
I can see the kid who's like, what about me? And I think I think a problem is that we have a tendency to marginalize the little kid part, to
Hmm.
marginalize and say, like, I'm not allowed to say that I want that. And so it's like, I know a lot of people will end up marginalizing a part of ourselves that's like, I'm afraid, like, what about me? Like, don't you care about me? Like, care about them, but what about, right? And what ends up happening is the more we marginalize the scared part, the little part, the part that's just like needing maybe just some reassurance, right? Like maybe
Hmm.
that's all that part would have needed, for example. But then what happens if we don't give the part the attention or the voice that it needs, then sometimes it'll
Hmm.
start driving our bus.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, that's the part that's then trying to control and trying to have power where it feels powerless, right? Like I
Hmm.
used to do anti-bullying workshops and like that's how bullying works, right? I feel powerless, therefore I try to take
Right.
power away from someone else to make me feel better. And it doesn't work, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I can very much relate to the I need to feel special thing. And that is a thing that is so, I mean, it's so normal, but it's also so exploitable.
Yeah.
For example, if you have a bad actor in your polycule who's engaging in triangulation and,
Yeah.
you have multiple people who want to feel special, it's so
Yeah.
easy. It becomes so easy to play people off against each other, create competition, that sort of
Oh
thing.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think for what I figured out for me is like what I need is not to feel like I'm better, but I do want to feel like I'm irreplaceable, and that's a different
Yeah.
thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate that. But I share with people all the time, there is nothing wrong with wanting to have things that are sacred in your dynamic, right?
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think from that perspective, it's like sacred doesn't have to be a date, right? Like sacred could be your anniversary, but it doesn't have to be like sacred doesn't have to be the holidays or someone's birthday. Like sacred doesn't even have to be a place, right? Like, yeah, okay, we could all have gone to this restaurant, right? It's not
Mhm.
my restaurant with you, but maybe we have rituals that we set up together that are special just for us. Because at the end of the day, like someone can have the same hair as me, they're never going to be me. Someone can have the same hair and the same like gender presentation as me, they're not going to be me. You can take someone like me who looks like me and put them on a bicycle, they're still not going to be me on a bicycle. So I think it's like, you know, helping people really understand that like everyone is special. But again, when we grow up in a mononormative society that is built on, oh my gosh, built on scarcity, on a scarcity model, there's never enough to go around. And I have to do the like Oprah thing, like you get love and you get a cup of love, like everybody gets the love. Like it's not a pie. It's not a
Mhm.
pie that runs out when everybody has pieces of it. Yes, time runs out though. People, we've had like the conversation when
Yeah.
like love is infinite, time is not. I know that
Mhm.
time and energy are not.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. Um, shall we move on from hierarchy? I do have other topics.
I am
Anything else to
the
say about that?
most ready. I'm the most ready to not be talking about hierarchy. I think the last thing I'm going to say about it is
Mhm.
hierarchy can be toxic. Egalitarianism can be toxic. Not talking about either of those things. Monogamy can be toxic. Polyamory can be toxic. Like all kinds of relationships and all kinds. Couples can be unhealthy. Couples can be super healthy. You know, anger can be righteous or it can be really, really toxic and unhealthy, right? Anything like hierarchy in and of itself does not have to be. Again, do I think ranking our partners is something that I agree on doing? I don't. That's not something I'm into. But I also think that if we stop being afraid of the words or we start glorifying some words and we start asking questions, that's how we actually grow and move forward. It's my point final.
Thank you. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, and I have to be careful here because it is a short book and I don't want to give people too many spoilers because we want people to get the book. Um, but I was quite interested. So hopefully this is more of a teaser than a spoiler. I was quite interested in the section that you had about leaving one partner for another, because I think
Uh,
that's the first place I've really seen that discussed in a sort of very transparent way.
yeah,
And I really appreciated that. And I think that's a worthwhile
thank
discussion.
you.
And you sort of laid
Yeah.
out, well, talk to me about that.
Yeah, you know, it's funny that you mentioned that because so we're doing our like official book launch event in Toronto on the 17th, which is Thursday. Oh my goodness. And so yesterday, is yesterday Sunday? Time is yesterday or maybe Saturday. One of my partners and I each took a copy of the book, and he helped me edit it. So we both know it very intimately. We each took a copy of the book out and we sat at a cafe and we both read through to choose what parts I want to read at the book launch. And this is actually one of the parts. So it's funny that
Mm,
you would mention it. So
yeah,
it's oh, hold on. Can you hear me right now?
I can hear and see you.
Oh, weird. So on my end, my video just went black. That's super bizarre.
Your video just froze for a second, but you're back. But your sound
Oh,
didn't stop. So,
cool beans, thank you. So yeah, that's one of the sections we chose. So in that section, so the third part of the book, and this is just sort of the more you know, I guess, is giving examples of mononormativity in action, like how it plays out in our life and how we can reflect on it. And so this is one of the sort of chunks in that where I thought of the most common things that I hear people say that reflect back this like mononormative experience. And one of them that I hear all the time, and it's so like I think it's probably the longest chunk in the third section because I spent so much time explaining how valid it would be to have this fear that what if we start dating, or what if I'm dating multiple people and one of my partners meets someone new, likes them better, and leaves me. And that fear, for me, is such a logical concern if we grew up in monogamy, right? If we grew up in the monogamy paradigm, in mononormativity, of course, that would be the fear, because that's the only way. There's two ways that that situation plays out usually in monogamy, right? It's my partner meets someone and likes them better and they cheat, or my partner meets someone and likes them better and they leave me for them, right? I'm sure there's some nuances that we could find other ways that plays out, but that's the common stuff, right? And so if I am now finding myself in a non-monogamous dynamic, which actually, in my perspective, if we're all doing it effectively, actually protects us from that reality. It actually creates a world where we don't just look at our cake, but we in fact get to eat the cake. Where it's like, it's this idea that, like, when people say, like, have my cake and eat it, I'm like, why else would I have cake? But I think the thing is, like, this is a situation where, like, here's the cake and you get multiple folds and everybody gets to enjoy it, because we have a system where I get to fall for someone and I get to still keep being in partnership and relationship with whoever else I was in partnership with already. But if we've never experienced that on a narcissistic level, if we've never had the opportunity to see a partner, whether we've never had an opportunity to be in multiple loving relationships, or even if it's just like sexy, intimate relationships at once, or experience it on the other end, or someone we care about, is intimate with someone else while also still caring about us, then of course it's like primordial fear of abandonment. Again, coming back to attachment theory, it checks out. Like, it's so legit.
And I mean, one of the things that I appreciated about this is you address the fact that, sometimes it does happen. And in fact, I think it's quite frequent that it happens that somebody,
Yeah.
Breaks up with one partner and ends up with the newer partner.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
liked that you had some reflection questions, and you go into, why this might happen, and why it's not necessarily a bad thing that it happens. And you had some reflection questions
Yeah.
for both the people on both sides of that dynamic to consider kind of what the right choice for them is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, try to, like, with a pretty limited word count and a person who is not concise. I was like, what do I want this to be for folks? Like, how do I want people to be able to take this away? Like, I wanted some definitions, I wanted some, reflections, and I wanted like real life in action, maybe some anecdotes, etc. So I figured, like, okay, so I'm presenting this as a reality. And then I was like, okay, I think it might be helpful to just add in. And again, it's not an extensive, I don't know if I would categorize this book as like a self-help book. Like, I don't know how people, I mean, that's weird. Like, as a category, I find that bizarre, but sure.
I would
But it's like,
consider these books more like extended essays.
yeah,
They're kind of they're thought pieces is how I
yeah, I
see them.
appreciate that. And so I think I just was like, how do I want this to read? And I'm like, okay, presenting the challenge. So what do I do if someone's actually living it? And so that's why I wanted to present just like a few questions, a few ways to reflect on it. It's not extensive. It's not a replacement for therapy. But, if I've never, like, some of the things that, we talk about in the section that we're discussing is like, yeah, if I'm in, like, how many people do we know or have we experienced, encountered, who have been in a relationship that's not working? We don't want to end it. And so we learn that you can open a relationship, and we try to do that because we think that, oh, we'll get our needs met elsewhere, right? Because, like, in non-monogamy, you say, like, yeah, you can get multiple needs met from multiple relationships. And I would die on the hill of, like, we all do that anyway, even monogamous. But I think that it, if like, and I do say this in the book, right? It's like, if our fundamental needs, right, our core needs for partnership are not being met, if I'm not feeling seen or heard, if I'm feeling understood, if I'm not feeling like I matter in a certain way. I mean, I could go on. We all have different needs, right? But if I'm not getting those needs met in a relationship, we're like, you know what? We love each other. Nobody wants to pull the plug, so we'll open it up. But then all of a sudden I start getting those needs met elsewhere. And I realize like, oh, wow, that last relationship actually was just not healthy, or I wasn't feeling, I wasn't meeting, it's not just not meeting my needs. Cause again, there's always going to be needs that we will and won't meet in certain relationships. But if my core, like what I need to feel seen, heard, and loved is not actually being met in one place, and then I see that like, oh shit, this is what it feels like when it is met. Yeah, of course, so frequently people will leave the relationship.
Yeah. You want to talk about sex negativity and how it plays out in non-monogamous relationships? That's another thing you touch on in the book.
I'm not trying to remember. I'm like, did I this personally? Hold on, sex negativity and
Well,
how
I can clue you more on it.
Thank you. Can you remind me of something I probably, I not probably, I
you
definitely
gave the
said.
example specifically about react, if you react differently when someone is out on a date versus something else, that there might be or what was it? I don't remember now, and I don't remember what page it was on. So we don't have to go into it, but I thought it was interesting. You got to read the book to find out, folks.
We all have to read the book. I swear I wrote it. I wrote it and I audio recorded the whole
I totally relate to that, like opening up my book and being like, oh, wow, that's interesting.
But your book is many, many amounts of my book. Like you have so much more in there that it makes more sense to me. But what I can say about sex negativity though is that, like, without knowing specifically what either of us is actually talking about in the book, but I think there is something to be said about, what is it about, I am getting flashbacks of what we are talking about, but the idea that, like, what about my partner having sex with someone else potentially, and again, I just want to name for those who practice polyamory. Polyamory is multiple loves. It's not about sex. There are people who are asexual or on the asexual spectrum who are very much polyamorous because it's not actually about the sex. It may or may not be a part of it. But in many kinds of non-monogamy, and including polyamory, sex can be a part of it. And so, this idea that, like, oh yeah, like, when my partner comes home from a date, idea like, did you have sex? And if we had sex, then it's like, ooh, that might bring up something in us, right? That it might be more uncomfortable. Or like, did you take a shower? Which, by the way, is a totally reasonable boundary to have and like agreement to have. We definitely have that in our, we change sheets between, and things like absolutely, like those are reasonable requests, right? But I think that it's very easy to, I've heard stories where it's like, oh, I lose interest in my partner because they've slept with someone else, or like the idea that someone has been tainted if they've been sleeping with someone else, right? And that to me really, really touches on kind of a lot of the sex negativity that we see in society. There's a lot of slut shaming that we see in our society. It's like sex sells, but don't have sex, right? And so it's this idea sex is, and it's wild because people perceive sex so differently, but it's seen as like this holy grail of intimacy. Cross that line, the biggest line has been crossed. Whereas there are some people that I've spoken with, or like there are some situations I've been in myself, right? Where it's like, oh, the sex isn't actually the concern, right? You hear people talk about emotional cheating, right? For some people, if I'm having all the sex I could possibly need, let's say, and I'm getting that need met, but I am feeling emotionally super disconnected and far away from a partner, it'll be a lot harder for me to know that, let's say, that partner is building an emotional bond with someone else, right? As opposed to the sex, because I don't have that need in the same way. But it's fascinating the way that being part of a sex negative culture would almost normalize that, like, oh, if you're sleeping with someone else, that's too much. That's too far. Like, that's the line that can't be crossed. And again, that comes back to the idea of monogamy, which then comes through a very, like, if we think about it, it's like very like Christian, colonial, like misogynistic, possessive. And anyway, I can go on to all the paradigms that connect.
Yeah. Shifting topics again.
Sure.
You mention in the book, and this is just sort of jumping off from your book,
Yep.
that you started teaching um, workshops and things about non-monogamy when you had relatively little experience in it, and that was
Yeah.
also my experience as well. I mean, I think my first non-monogamous relationship started in 2008. I was blogging starting in 2011. By 2014, I published the first edition of my book, and suddenly I was
Yeah.
touring and speaking and to like big crowds,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
talk about imposter syndrome. But I just, and there have been conversations, I mean, currently there are conversations, but these things pop up now and again about who we should be listening to, and how to find reliable sources on non-monogamy. And I mean, there's certainly a lot of value to personal experience, especially personal experience that is backed up by research. And
Yeah.
back in the day, there were a lot fewer people with long experience,
Yeah.
and lots more room for new perspectives.
Yeah.
I came into a world where hierarchical polyamory was the norm. One of the reasons I started writing was
Absolutely.
because I wanted to write about that.
Yeah.
But today, there's so much more out there. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you vet?
Well, this is a great question. So for those who don't know, I've been practicing polyamory since January 25th, 2005. I know that because it is my anniversary, and then also my wedding anniversary with one of my partners. 15 years later, we got married. So 20 plus years ago is when I started practicing polyamory. And it was 2009 when I gave my first workshop about it at McGill University in Montreal. And so the reason they sought me out, it was their shag shop that sought me out. And it was because I knew someone who worked there. And she was like, you are the only person I know who's been doing it. It's so fascinating that you're mentioning imposter syndrome, because it had been 4 years that I had been actively practicing non-monogamy. And in that time, I had dated, like I had many different partnerships. There were different configurations of non-monogamy. But when she asked me to come speak and do this workshop, I was like, I'm not an expert at this. And I remember her looking at me and saying something like, do you have 10,000 hours or 100,000 hours, whatever it is of experience, right? Whatever they say, like requires expertise. And at the time I did the math in answering whatever she said. I'm like, yeah. She's like, so you're an expert. I'm like, I'm not going to say that, but I'll still give a workshop. Anyway, I think the thing is that there is value to so many. I always say, get more perspectives. I try to share content, especially I do a lot of like repost on TikTok, but on Instagram I share a lot to my stories, right? So you can see it for like, I know what people are looking at for 24 hours, right? And so I try to share content from different non-monogamy creators, and not just non-monogamy, but like different creators about all kinds of things, because for me, having multiple experiences is invaluable. I am never going to be able to provide the experience of what it's like to navigate racism within non-monogamy communities as a person with this color skin. I am never, right? There are so many things that I know I can talk about based on what people have shared with me, right? But my personal experience only takes me so far. And I think that what happens is that having multiple perspectives, including how many couples or thruples or polycules are on the internet just making like fun content about what their lives look like, that's valuable too, right? But when it comes to vetting people about like, who do I want to listen to? Whose voice do I want to consider important in my own decision making? I think some of the things that I'm always looking for are, is it someone and this isn't just about non-monogamy, right? When like critical thinking is so important, and I'm like, we all make mistakes. Humans are fallible, and this is not about finding the person who's made no mistakes, because they don't exist, right? My thing is, okay, Do we know, like, first of all, you can ask the question, how long has this person been doing this? Sure. You may want a certain number of, however many hours you want experience. Sure. Yes, there's academia. Like, sure, I have a master's degree in social work. Cool. I actually don't think that academic supremacy is the thing I need the most. I think there are other ways to gain experience and knowledge. Can it be helpful? Absolutely. Is that something that's valuable to me? Do I need to know that this person can hold space based on a certain sort of field of knowledge and research? Absolutely. That could be, it depends on what matters to you. But I think more than anything, how does the person behave and treat people in their community? What kind of perspective are they bringing? Are they open to dialogue with community? Are they open to having healthy and respectful debates? Are they interested in collaborating with people in community? I think that's a huge part, is like, I live in the middle of nowhere, not far from Toronto. Like, that's my closest city and where most of my life happens. But like, for me, like, finding people that I can collaborate with, whether it's in an online setting or whatever it is, so that, they're growing as part of a community, is so invaluable. But I think it's looking at how people respond to different things within community, looking at not just their takes on one thing, but their general perspectives. What are their perspectives about lots of things, right? And sometimes it's just like, if we're looking at, it's picking up a book and reading a book and seeing if I agree with it, seeing if it makes sense. But what I really want to say is, like, how do I feel when I am consuming information from this person, when I'm receiving information? Do I feel shamed? Do I feel forced? Do I feel guilty? Do I feel pressure? Do I feel embarrassed? Do I feel like I'm bad? If you're talking to someone or you're learning from someone who's teaching about non-monogamy or anything, and the feeling you get is like, oh God, maybe I can't do this. I think I'm bad at non-monogamy. Or if you feel like you'll never be good enough and the only way that you can get better is to buy more things from someone, or to like, I can go into this, right? But it's like, I think really considering the difference between like leadership and education and support versus power, prestige, hierarchy, and cultishness. Because we see that in leadership, right? And this is not just non-monogamy, right? What happens to someone who rises to, and I'm saying someone's people who rise to the top. And then, like, again, the basic, like Donald Trump. When I grew up, Donald Trump was just like a cameo in Home Alone. I was just like, oh, it's a kid that, like, it's the person that, like, Kevin runs into at the hotel. Like, that's it, and then all of a sudden, look what happened, So the thing is that, like, it's just, I don't know, just making sure that people are willing to be accountable and participate in community. It's not necessarily about number of years. And I think that's the last thing I'm going to say, because I know I've been formulating a thought while speaking. So thank you so much for allowing me to do that. But I think the thing is that it's really easy to say that because someone has a lot of years of experience, that they must be good at non-monogamy or good at whatever thing. Yes, years and amount of experience is something, but just because I've been doing something for a long time doesn't mean I've been doing it well, and doesn't mean that I've been putting in the work. Like, I'm saying, like, oh, I've been doing this for over 20 years. There's no guarantee that I'm good at it. I think I'm working on it. I think I'd like to get better at it. It's just something I'm in, but there's been a lot of therapy dollars that have gone to non-monogamy for me. But I think the thing is that it's like, just trusting. I think a lot of people have caused harm because they're like, oh, this is how I do it. I've been doing it for a long time. And people who are newer are like, oh, well, I guess I have to follow your lead. Babes, think for yourself. I think I could have shortened that last maybe like 12 minutes of talking to saying, think for yourself, pay attention to what people are saying and doing and how they treat each other.
So we need to move towards wrapping up. So I'm just going to offer some space if there's anything that you want to say that I haven't asked about, or that you haven't had a chance to say.
Ugh, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm like the kind of tired at the end of my day where I think as an ambivert, I'm leaning on the extroverted part that gains energy from just engaging. Because I think if I stop for too long, I'm just going to crash. So that's what's coming for me. I know you're 3 hours in the past, but I guess it's just, I feel like I've said probably too much about the book already. So check out the book, but also, you know, if you want to see more, if you want to vet me with your own experience, with your own eyes, and get a sense of what else I have to say in the world, because I don't just talk about non-monogamy. I say all the time, I'm a whole ass person, right? Polyam Marla, at Polyam Marla, like polyamory, but with Marla. You know, polyamarla.com if you want to join our mailing list. We have upcoming events. Like if you're in Toronto, I'm going to be at another story bookshop on Thursday doing the book launch. And there's an event coming up with Andrea Zanin, who is the co-author of More Than Two, as well as the second editor of my book, because the first one lives in my house with me. but we're going to be doing another event in Toronto as well. The book itself is available for, again, I've been saying pre-order, but then people keep showing me pictures of the book in their hands, and I'm like, I guess it's just available now.
Yeah, it happens. Once they ship from the printer, we don't have a ton of control over, you know,
Yeah.
when and how they go out into the world. I'm just double checking. I think that all your events are listed on the book page.
Yeah, they should be.
Yeah, they are. So if you
Yeah.
go to thornapplepress.ca, and then go to our books, Marla's book is on there, and then click on the book, and it's got all their events listed. So if you want to find one of those events, or if you want to pre-order the links through some of the places that we would like you to pre-order or order through, I guess you
Yeah.
can just buy them
Yeah, I
now.
guess it's just ordering.
If you're in Canada, you can go to Book Manager. Again, there's a link from Thornapple Press, and it'll show you where the book might be in stock close to you,
Yeah.
or where you can order it. Local bookstores you can order it from. So yeah, and I think that's everything.
I
Yep, I
think
did
it's
the where you can
everything.
buy the books, where you can find events. You did where you can
Yeah.
find you. So yeah.
Yeah. And in like all my link trees, like on the website, and also like in my bios, all the things, all the things, all the places. But yeah, I thank you so much, Eve. It was so nice to chat. I think it's the longest we've been able to chat in a long time. It's really
It's
nice.
true. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was great. All
I'm
right.
gonna
Thank you.
I was gonna say I'm just gonna go back in to read the part about sex negativity because I'm so giddy. I'm like, it's gonna irk me until I read it again.
Yeah. And thanks very much to everyone who joined us.
Yeah, thanks, folks.
All right.